In addition to that, you have the profits made by banks through laundering money.
What we are doing in the war on drugs is exactly what the most successful drug kingpins like. We are, in a sense, using government money to keep the small-time opposition out of the business, to keep the prices up, and to keep the supply coming from only the most protected sources.
Prohibition breeds corruption, it breeds a black market. And we've seen in Australia quite a large number of police officers who have been charged in relation to the supplying of marijuana, and that's the corruption element that's inbred.
Lawrence McKinney holds the patent for extracting natural THC from marijuana plants for medical use, but the war on drugs has prevented him from using his patent.
The major advantages of the drug war to the Justice Department is that the RICO statutes allow them to confiscate and sell anything they can find that's connected to any person who has any large amounts of marijuana. And the result has been such amount of money, over $1 billion last year, that these drug laws are simply phenomenally profitable to the Justice Department.
Fighting a war on drugs is big business now.
It is strictly to encourage this society of people who can't imagine themselves in another job other than fighting a war, and when they run out of wars outside of the country, then we're implementing our own military on our own people, and it's just gotten totally out of hand.
Law enforcement, whether they are military or not, constantly try to take on more and more of the appearance of military, and it's a psychological tactic as much as anything else. When this happens to someone, the helicopters will come down and they'll hover and they'll direct troops, or there'll be troops traipsing in the woods near your house, and your animals will get frightened, and your babies will get frightened, and you'll get frightened, regardless of whether you're involved in anything illegal.
When the walls have begun to crumble, when the laws have begun to burn, when the wind is singing freedom, when the stone begins to turn, when the wind is singing freedom, 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 freedom.
You have vast amounts of money internationally spent to force other countries to go after their marijuana. Nepal was one of the last countries in the world that had a controlled marijuana marketplace, you might say, that was well controlled by the government. Now, because of the pressure from the United States, they made it illegal. With marijuana suddenly illegal, the trafficking was taken over by criminals. And these criminal smugglers very rapidly began to discover there were things that were more valuable than marijuana to smuggle, and infected Nepal and that whole area with heroin smuggling and worse. So it shows you an example of how just with a few dollars and a little bit of pressure, the United States can take a regulated, non-harmful situation and turn it into a situation of crimes, victims, money, and extortion and death.
The repression of Lebanon's ancient hemp industry occurred recently during the Gulf War at the behest of the US government and Syria's President Assad.
Now we are friends with Assad, and the United States is backing his efforts to wipe out marijuana growers in Lebanon with tanks. That's what we do with our marijuana policies worldwide. The United States drug policy in toto affects every country.
Eddie Engelsman is head of drug policy for the Dutch government.
We think that cannabis use is hazardous. We have a very, I must say, comprehensive anti-smoking policy. But does this harm or this risk of getting any harm justify such draconic measures? We think no. At least our policy shouldn't do more harm than such a drug would do.
Every major government study ever publicly funded that studied hemp has come to the conclusion that criminalizing it is a bad methodology. Richard Nixon wanted to really drive the stake through the heart of marijuana, so he appointed a 21-member committee.
The Schaefer Commission recommended that marijuana be decriminalized. Nixon just denied the results, rolled right over them.
The recent US study, commissioned by conservative California Governor Duke Majan, recommended that adults be allowed to grow marijuana plants for personal use. The embarrassed governor refused to endorse it. It's a similar story in Australia.
Since 1970, there have been up to 12 inquiries or royal commissions or parliamentary inquiries into the drug marijuana, and all of those inquiries have recommended decriminalisation, and yet no government has been prepared to stand up and say, well, the inquiries have recommended decriminalisation, we will act on the recommendations of the inquiries. All the surveys show that over 50% of the community accept the use of marijuana, and if that is so, then what you're doing is getting a law that is enforcing something that the community doesn't necessarily want enforced.
In Holland, the drug problem, the issue, is considered an issue of health and welfare. So it's not for the police and the courts. One objective of our cannabis policy, if I may say so, not prosecute people. It is illegal, but to a certain extent tolerated, which has nothing to do with a laissez-faire approach, but we didn't want to push people underground.
The sale of marijuana is tolerated in many Dutch coffee shops.
Nowadays, cannabis users have nothing to do with users using harder drugs. We have integrated education on cannabis in our general health education system in schools. In America, cannabis use is many times higher than it is in Holland, in spite of all the measures and all their wars and all their warning and just say no campaigns.
So what is the attraction to marijuana?
It does carry a fantasy-inducing, thought-catalyzing quality. It allows the mind to rove and scan in a much more expansive domain of information than is normally the case. I mean, if you don't smoke cannabis, you may spend your evening balancing your check account. If you do smoke cannabis, you may spend your evening contemplating the causes of the Greek Renaissance.
It's a perceptual enhancer. It's like a child seeing something for the first time. There's a little bit of that excitement about the visual world. It enhances the appreciation of music and the graphic arts.
I have met many people who I think have experienced increase in imagination and creativity from experimenting with marijuana, who have discovered themselves as physical, sensual, sexual beings on marijuana who otherwise had not developed that part of themselves.
They find that it's useful in gaining perspective and insight in their lives.
Marijuana creates a receptive, suggestible state which could facilitate certain kinds of therapy. It often increases people's access to their own unconscious, to the images that they have in their mind, to their dreams, to